what do people in rural areas of Africa do day in, day out, since they are not employed in a formal office where they have to go to every day? Today, come along with me as I take you through my typical day in a village, so that at the end of this episode, you'll be able to either answer that question for yourself, like what do people in rural areas do all day? We'll be able to get into the discussion, the larger discussion on, for example, if people in rural areas don't work hard, but if they work hard, especially on productive activities, then why do we still see in development records that most of the poor people in the world are found in rural areas, and especially in rural areas of Africa? So come along with me as I take you through my typical day in a village. Normally, when I was in the village, my day could start between 5:30 and 6 a.m. in the morning, not because I set an alarm to wake myself up at that time, but because once people within the house started their morning activities, then sometimes that would wake me up if they were preparing for the person who milks the cows, because that used to be the first activity. And with that, of course, you might hear and wake up. And if I did not wake up before 6 o'clock, then there was the cock crow, the usual cock crow at 6 a.m. I could not, I had to wake up, because you hear not only our cock crowing, but other cocks from the rest of the village. And if you pay some attention to that, you would be like, oh, did they call one another? Because one will just finish, another one will be like, where. With that, I ended up getting up at that time, prepare myself, and start my day. Breakfast was served this early so that people can start their day after they've eaten. And mom is on a menu which has specific times when she's supposed to eat. We prepared 2 sets of breakfasts. That's breakfast for mom, and then breakfast for the rest of the house. And after breakfast, the program started. We needed to do cleaning, which involves sweeping the house, mopping the house, cleaning the breakfast dishes, sweeping the front yard, and also the other person in charge of livestock will be releasing them to go and start now their day of feeding, and also to feed them. Like if it's the cows, then the person needed to go and get and harvest napier grass or brachiaria grass and bring to them. And this mostly happens during the dry season. Otherwise, if it's during the rainy season, it means there'll be enough grass for the livestock to be released to go and feed. Need to open for the chickens, feed the chicks if they're there, feed the rabbits, and also if there's a goat, release them also to go out for feeding, and also open for the dog to be outside for a bit before it's locked back into its place and fed. Then clothes need to be washed, and also spreading out food items to dry. It's like almost on a daily basis. If the weather is good, then there'll be something being taken out. For example, if we need to take maize to the grinding mill, then the maize needs to be aired, dried outside like for 3 or 4 days before we can make flour out of it. If it's millet, then we need to spread out the different ingredients. The millet itself, small millet, sorghum, cassava, before they are mixed and prepared into flour. So these items are spread out to dry. And on days when we'll be eating something like pumpkin as part of the meal, then it needs to be chopped up in the morning and put outside to dry. These activities would change or would be implemented in a different way depending on the season. For example, if it's a planting season, then people might not put as much effort on household tasks because they will need to focus on gardening as well. So, for example, if we were in the month of January, that's during the land preparation time, January and part of February, which means that at this time, people within the household don't have much to do out in the garden because the hired labor would go and do the work, and they don't need a lot of supervision when they are digging and preparing the land. But then towards the end of February all the way to April, because the long rains start in March, during the planting season, we don't just give the seeds to the workers and ask them to go and plant. No, somebody from the household has to go with them. I did a lot of that because you need to go and show them what will be planted where, and also even demonstrate to some of them how they are doing it. For example, if you're intercropping maize with beans, because people do that in different ways. So if you tell them to just go and plant maize and beans, there are those who might throw like one maize seed and one bean seed in the same hole. That's one way of doing it. There are those who might do one hole, they drop maize, the next hole, they drop beans. That's another way of doing it. And there are those who might do one line, they drop maize seeds, and then the next line or row, they will plant bean seeds. So it really depends on your household, how you prefer to do it. So you have to be there to show them and to guide them on which system that you use. And the same applies when it comes to planting vegetables. Are you planning to just plant them traditionally where people scatter the seed? Or do you plan to plant them on lines or on beds the way I did it? I had to go and show them how I preferred the beds for vegetables to be prepared and which vegetable needed to be planted near which one, because I did a lot of intercropping, companion cropping, as one way of managing pests. So that would be a typical day during the planting season. And the same applies during weeding season, in that sometimes somebody from the household needs to go and see how the workers are doing it and also guide them on where to start, because there are crops which need weeding immediately when the weeds appear, and there are food crops that can endure for some time, especially if you don't have enough labor to do that. Another critical season is the harvesting season. Yes, because we need a lot of labor, we need a lot of people, especially if it's harvesting vegetables, because sometimes some of the vegetables, if you leave them to stay on the farm for too long, then they kind of mature and people don't like to eat that. Or even harvesting a simple crop like maize, that's corn, because like in my rural home, we are in the Kenyan highlands, and if you don't harvest at the right time, then the next rain will come, and if it rains on maize which is already dry, it means that you're going to need the labor now to be drying the maize more outside, and you cannot even dry it outside because it's the rainy season. The other reason that harvesting season is a busy time is that as you harvest, for example, like us, we were not growing crops for sale. It's just for household consumption. But the definition of our household is not just the people who are within the home. It's our relatives in town, our relatives in faraway cities. So we have to think about them during the harvesting season. It's a critical time when you now evoke a lot of social relations, because you remember them, you harvest, you're calling them, hey, do you need this? We've harvested maize, or green maize is ready. Do you need, how much do you need? And then we have to harvest, we have to find a way to ship it to them. This is one practice which I noticed in the village, and I kept on asking myself, like, is this why or how rural areas become poor in that we put in a lot of energy in the production, but then once we harvest, we are like calling everybody to come and participate in the celebration. Actually, at some stage, I asked that question and somebody answered it by telling me, oh, those guys are not giving us the food for free because when they have financial needs, like a medical issue, they need school fees, they are going to call us and we are going to send the money. So with that, I started learning about interdependencies between rural and urban areas. The other activity that we did during the harvesting season was to prepare seeds for the next planting season. We are learning to be independent again when it comes to sourcing seeds. So during the harvesting season, that's when somebody has to be keen, and this somebody means a family member, go out to the field as they are harvesting or once they bring the harvested crop to the homestead. If it's maize, you have to go there and pick the best and put it aside so that you can prepare it and store it for the next planting season. Not really the immediate next, because seed has to be stored for at least 1 year before you can replant it. If it's seeds from vegetables, then during the harvesting season, you need to guide the workers on which area they should not harvest so that that particular vegetable goes into seed. Because if you keep on harvesting, for example, leaves from vegetables, then that vegetable will continue producing more leaves. But if you stop harvesting the leaves, then it will move on to produce seeds. So I had to be in the garden every time somebody went to harvest and tell them, like, leave this section because we would like it to grow into seed. And also when it comes to seed preparation, like from tomatoes, I had to harvest the best looking tomatoes and take them home and take them through the actual seed preparation, like cutting them up, washing them, drying them, and once they are dry, store and label them. And also, I forgot to mention about the weeding season, because that's the time when crops that's when we find a lot of pests within the garden. But since our whole garden, the whole family farm is an organic garden, so we don't use any synthetic fertilizer, which means that we needed to prepare natural pest management solutions. I had to teach the workers and guide them on how to use tithonia and other plants within the homestead to prepare a liquid, which then we went and sprayed on the vegetables. Of course, while participating in the farming activities, depending on how many people were left within the homestead, remember there is lunch to be prepared. So there will be these impromptu visitors to be attended to, because in the village, when people arrive, they need to be fed. They need to be given food. If they go away without eating anything or drinking something, a nice sugary drink, then they might go away and be like, oh, we were not welcomed when we went there. So receiving visitors is part of work which needs to be done within the compound. And woe unto you if a death occurs in the village. It means like all the work on the farm stops, because that's a cultural practice. You cannot go out. If you are a blood relative and you live nearby, then you cannot go to the farm. Be it planting season, be it weeding season, be it harvesting season. And again, nowadays, it takes like between 2 to 3 or 4 weeks for somebody to be buried, which means that all that time you will not tend to your crops. And it happened to us at least twice during the planting season and during the weeding season. So, and this disruption also calls for your labor, in that if visitors are coming to the compound, you have to be available to entertain them. I just mentioned the issue of preparing meals, but they are very important component within a rural setup, because if people are going to the farm to work like all day, then they need to eat, and they need to eat well, which means that you have to schedule meal preparations into your daily activities. But for us, at some point, we realized that we were having so many workers within. So what we decided to do was give the workers lunch money, because there are people near the shopping center who prepare meals for anybody who would like to buy affordable meals without going into a restaurant. So we decided to take that option, which saved us time from preparing lunch. But once in a while, after the harvest, again, it's another practice within many communities that after people have harvested or after they've planted, you prepare a meal for them. And also, even people within the home, of course, we normally need to take a break, take a snack at 4 o'clock, and depending on the season, this snack can mean lighting a charcoal stove to roast the maize, or lighting a 3-stone fire to cook sweet potatoes, or to cook green maize, or to boil groundnuts, or just sitting, picking fruits, harvesting fruits from the farm, and sitting there, relaxing a bit to eat. So food is an important aspect, I think, to all human beings, not just to people in the village. And when we sit, what I noticed is that like at 4 o'clock, if we decide to have tea and something like roast maize, that's when we start having conversations about our day, how our day was. With that, you get to learn quite a lot. The other thing I learned was that always try and go with mom for her walks, because she likes going to the farm to check on the work that was being done or had been done the previous day or during that day. And that's when you get to learn a lot, because she'll point out something like, oh, tomorrow when they come, ask them to work in this area this way. Or she would tell you something like, oh, today they went to weed for sweet potatoes. Tomorrow, ask them to weed for the maize, because the maize has a stage where it needs to be weeded for before it can, progress to the next stage, like of flowering. She'll explain to you that for sweet potatoes, they can stand some weeds for a few weeks, so they are not in a hurry to be weeded for. Or she might tell you that the groundnuts have dropped their flowers, so now you can weed for them. So it's a learning process when you participate in some of these activities. And also, for example, during the weeding season, mom liked to come to the farm, to the vegetable garden, and show us or show the workers how to weed. How not only to weed by removing the weeds, but also it's a time when you prune the vegetables, not earlier than that. So she would come in, show us how to prune, show us how to harvest the left leafy green vegetables, so that way they get more energy to put in more new leaves. So during the different gardening activity, it's a very important session for anybody who would like to learn. I also saw this as I worked with the young men on the farm. Yes, I mostly worked with the young men. We decided as a family that there were too many unemployed young men in the surrounding areas, and we were like, how do we make them more productive? Because some of them had finished Form 4, that's their high school. Some had not finished and they were like, oh, we don't have school fees. And some were waiting to join college. So we were like, okay, we'll be engaging mostly these young people so that they can have a source of income and they can be productive while they are waiting to move on to their next stage in life. And during this time, what I realized is that I learned quite a lot from some of them, and I got to teach the group quite a lot because I liked going to the garden to stay with them, again, just to hear their stories. You know, when you are out in the farm working, you get to know the families, where they come from. So when I stayed with these young people, I got to learn quite a lot, and others were like, I did not perform quite well in school as I'd wanted, so I'm looking for money to go and repeat. Others would be like, I'm looking for money so I can take myself back to college. And for others, when I showed them how to prepare garden beds for vegetables, some of them were like, I've never seen this, I've never done this. We got to exchange a lot of knowledge, a lot of information by just being out in the farm with the workers. And of course, for the very quick ones, some of them surprised me. You know, sometimes when you're in the village, you might think that people are not keen. These people, they don't come from our village. They were coming from faraway places. But I was surprised because they would ask you something like, oh, and how is Canada? And you take me to Canada. And that time I get surprised, like, how did they even know where I sometimes live, that I do in Canada? And there was one who came and asked for my books. They were like, I would like to go and read your books. I almost fell down. So I was like, how do they even know I write books? And I think because nowadays young people are online, so once they know your name, those quick ones, I think they go and Google to know more about you. And that's when I was like, oh my goodness, they've gone, these guys I've been working with, trying to behave like one of them, if assuming they would imagine that maybe I've come from Nairobi, which is the capital city. They know so much about me. Okay, so that's part of staying in the village. And another thing that I was so glad that I got to work with these young people and got to teach them about is composting. That's when I realized that most people in the villages are not composting, even though they keep on complaining that synthetic fertilizer is very expensive, or some of them say it burns the soil in their gardens. But I was surprised that not many of them know about composting. So I got to teach the young men that I was working with. So our days were days of learning for myself and also for the others to learn. But we did not spend all our time out in the farm. There was, shopping needing to be done if it was a market day, because the local farmers market takes place every Tuesday and every Friday. So that means that part of the people who work within the household, one of us needed to go to the market to go and buy what we don't have on the farm. The other task that we did within the homestead was to germinate the different types of beans before we prepare them. So we did a lot of germination, watching them, rinsing, and once they germinated, for the ones that we needed to grind into flour, then we again took it through the process of drying it out in the sun, but not directly in the sun. So that also takes time, and also the grinding of the different foods that we use to add when we are cooking. And of course, there were other tasks which include, as I mentioned at the beginning, feeding livestock, but also livestock and also their sleeping area cleaned. Like, for the cows, every morning, the cow dung has to be swept out, taken to the pit, because that's what we added as part of the manure when we are preparing compost. So my typical day in the village and varies or varied depending on what season of the year it was. If it was the land preparation, planting, weeding, harvesting, preparing the harvest for storage. We've come to the end of this episode, but this is just the beginning of more episodes to come where I'll be sharing more detailed information about the different aspects of village life, which I have mentioned, especially when it comes to gardening. In future episodes, I'll be focusing on each of the items. For example, I mentioned that we prepared compost, we used natural pesticides, we prepared garden beds. So in future episodes, I'll be focusing on each of those items as a separate activity. And for you to stay informed, to know every time when I post an episode, it's by subscribing. So subscribe below, like this video so that way the system learns to show you similar videos. So it's a goodbye from me until next time. Bye bye.